This is California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerantz. I'm glad you're with us today. Our guest is Kevin Jeffries. He's a member of the California State Assembly. Later on in the program, we'll be speaking with one of his colleagues, Mike Morrell, and then we'll be speaking with the District Attorney of San Bernardino County. But first, I want to speak with you, Assemblyman, about transparency in Sacramento. You have been a huge advocate of increasing transparency, and I want to talk to you about how bills are delivered to members. Give us a sense of how that works.
Well, the short version is everybody has a window to introduce legislation.
Okay.
You go through a drafting process, you work with the attorneys, and then you introduce legislation. And then it's set for a while, about a month, and then it gets referred to committees. That's the normal process. Right. That's what we're all supposed to do. But there's a hidden little process behind the scenes that members use to ram bills through that we don't get to read or don't even go to a committee to be heard. And that's where the real problems start.
And how does that work? I would presume there's law which says a bill needs to be submitted, go to committee. Sure. So how are whomever does this able to present a bill without its publication?
Yeah, the challenge is that the legislature has the authority to waive the rules on a simple majority vote. So whereas the state requires local government through a statute, you must have 72 hours notice.
That's known as the Brown Act.
Right, it's known as the Brown Act. Yeah, well, that does not apply to the legislature. The legislature is exempted from the rules it's enforcing on local government.
So explain for us how what you just described works in practice, because what you're saying is there's a problem, and give us a sense of the scope of that problem.
And the problem really comes down to the bills that are rushed through without any formal public notice or minimal public notice, may or may not even go to a committee. Sometimes they just come straight to the assembly floor for a vote. Mm-hmm. We've seen that with some of the education cuts. We've seen that with some of the fire tax, they call them fees. We've seen a whole host of problems with the way that's done. Basically, you take an existing bill that had been introduced earlier in the year, you gut out the language that's in that bill.
Is that gut and amend?
That's called gut and amend, and you quickly insert new language into it. That's not necessarily a problem, because then it's supposed to go to a committee to be heard and go through the process. But the rules get waived and they bring it straight to the floor for a vote.
But as I understand it, this process is most often utilized around budget deadlines. So
that's fair. That's fairly accurate.
I believe last year you were presented, the 80 of you, or maybe even the 120 of you, were presented a budget bill on June 14th, late in the afternoon or early in the morning, and you had to vote on it on June 15th. Is that correct?
That would probably be, yeah, that's probably a fair statement. We have about 30 budget bills. We have the main budget bill, and then you have budget trailer bills.
I understand. And
sometimes you get days, sometimes you get hours, sometimes you get minutes to see what's in them.
And we have a $90 billion budget, so you have minutes to review.
Well, that's $90 billion, basically what we control. Then there's all the matching federal dollars that push it way beyond that.
So you have presented a bill. It's called ACA 1, and that bill would require at least 24 hours notice, or is it 24 hours publication?
It's 24 hours in print. What I wanted and what I think we have to do is we have to give everybody, legislators, the media, the public, the chance to read the bills before we're voting on them.
We've been speaking about this for, I think, your entire 6 years that you've been.
It took 5 years to get the hearing.
And that's what I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
You've been pounding the pavement on this issue month after month, year after year, and all you asked for at first glance was a hearing.
Just give me a hearing.
In committee.
Yes.
And what happened?
After 5 years of waiting, reintroducing the bill every legislative cycle, the media finally picked it up and said, what is going on here? They finally agreed to give it a hearing in what's called the Rules Committee.
Which is the most important committee.
It's the most important committee that meets in one of the smallest rooms that has no television cameras.
How interesting.
And so that meeting was held, and the bill that took 5 years to get to a hearing was killed in less than 5 minutes.
Explain. I want the theatrics.
Oh, no, there was minimal theatrics. This wasn't a hotly debated, contested bill. It was, I presented it and I said, look, we are shortchanging the public, we're shortchanging legislators. We need to be able to read some of these controversial bills. All I'm asking for is 24 hours.
And what happened?
And the chairwoman said, I believe that existing statutes protect the public and all of us adequately. There's no need for this bill. I recommended a no vote. And that went straight down party lines.
And the vote was taken?
And the vote was taken.
No testimony other than from Assemblyman Jeffries?
I think some of the Republican legislators may have voiced some support for it. In fact, they did. They voiced some support for it. But otherwise,
no. You didn't bring in good government advocates. You weren't allowed to do any of that.
No, we could have. We could have. We were looking for someone from one of the good government groups, but they were actually, unfortunately, testifying in another committee at the same time.
What about the notion that the Assembly needs flexibility? And if you have this, if this bill had passed, we would lose flexibility.
I don't know that flexibility at the sacrifice of open and transparent government is necessarily a good thing. Look, if a bill can't stand on its own in the sunshine, it probably shouldn't be adopted. Just because you amend it in the late days of session doesn't mean that you therefore earn the right to ram it through. It needs time to have folks look at it.
Do you know how the Brown Act passed? Was it in the legislature, or was it through an initiative?
I believe it was through an initiative process originally, and then the legislature has strengthened it throughout the years.
So is it time for supporters of Sunshine, as you described, to go to the voters on this issue?
Oh, I think we don't have a choice. Look, the problem is the legislature is not going to reform itself. It's just simply not going to do it. And so the only way we're going to fix it is through the initiative process. Now, the most radical way is to simply say the legislature shall adhere to the Brown Act, period.
That's one way.
It will throw partisan politics a huge curveball because it will make it difficult for the partisan caucuses to privately meet on their own and discuss legislation behind closed doors.
So
I'm not so sure that's a bad thing. I got to be honest with you.
Really? Don't you think it's important that you have a chance to caucus with your party?
I believe it's important to have a chance to caucus. I don't believe it's important to have a chance to discuss public policy behind closed doors and virtually make those decisions without any transparency.
And I don't use this pejoratively, just deal making. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Well, look, yeah, of course. I mean, somebody's got to cut a deal someday to get something passed. I understand that. Once you cut the deal, it should be in the public arena for an opportunity for everybody to look at it.
So let's...
You don't need 120 legislators sitting behind closed doors, virtually behind closed doors, cutting deals and then ramming it through and not letting the public see it.
Let's say you don't go that far, but you simply present to the voters, all bills must be in print for 24 hours.
Right.
Okay, so now what? I mean, can you do that, or you have to collect 1 million signatures?
Oh, yeah, it's probably it's a constitutional amendment, so I suspect that's 800,000 signatures.
I also wonder. I mean, in a lot of ways, the bills that you're discussing, especially the budget bills, they're negotiated by the Big Five, which is the leaders of both parties and the governor. Couldn't you pick off of some Democrats who are kind of frustrated with that process to get a bill through, or they couldn't force a hearing, a committee hearing? I mean,
you could, except for there's very few who want to sacrifice their political careers in the Capitol and go against leadership.
Even in the era of term limits.
Even in the era of term limits, because a lot of legislators are looking for where they're going next. And you just don't want to upset those who elected you to office.
This doesn't feel partisan. This does not feel like a partisan issue.
It should not be. Because look, the rotten votes, the votes that you cast and you go, wow, why did I do that if I'd only known what was in there, happens to Republicans and Democrats alike. So you would think logic would dictate that an open and transparent process would benefit everybody.
In our final moments, you are termed out. Do you have someone to take the reins on this once you leave?
I hope so. I hope so. There's a lot of very frustrated legislators in Sacramento.
We'll see. His name is Kevin Jeffries. He's a member of the California State Assembly. When we come back, we'll be joined by one of his colleagues. His name is Mike Morrell. I'm Brad Pomerantz. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. Our guest, as I said, Mike Morrell, member of the California State Assembly. After we speak with the Assemblyman, we'll be speaking with Mike Ramos. He is the District Attorney of San Bernardino County. But first, sir, I want to congratulate you. You were recently named Minority Whip by the GOP leader in the California State Assembly, Connie Conway.
I was.
What does that mean?
Well, what it means
Other than
is
cracking the whip?
Well, it means cracking the whip, essentially, and just working, keeping our caucus together, our team together, and working with them on bills, the direction we should go, and yeah, trying to move us all in the same direction and try to win elections and at the same time represent our people well according to our political principles written from our party platform.
Talk to us, though, about how that interfaces with the desire for, or alleged desire for, bipartisanship, for compromise, for getting bills move forward, because in the end, you are the minority party, and so it becomes a challenge to get bills out. I mean, you do.
Yeah,
so
we do.
How does that work?
Well, one thing is it does take a 2/3 majority for any budget bills.
Or taxes.
Tax increases. So that's huge. Where we did win last year, we saved the California taxpayers $58 billion, which was phenomenal.
58 billion?
58
Where do you get
billion.
that number? I mean,
the LAO, I believe, is where that came from.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it was in our party.
And are what you're referring to the party's refusal to allow an initiative to go on the ballot to extend sales tax?
Or raise taxes. No one went up on taxes.
Other, in addition
for last year.
Okay.
Yeah. And so anyway, the second thing is, you know, I think the thing is we are really willing to cooperate with our governor. We're willing to cooperate with the Democrats, but let me explain. Look, there is compromising. I think we will compromise our preferences, but on economic fundamentals and principles, it's really hard to do because it's a little out of control. We need to get our budget under control and not raise taxes.
I have to talk about cooperating with the governor, who's a Democrat.
Yeah.
There are few times, and please forgive me, where I can say the Republicans in Sacramento outmaneuvered the legislative Democrats. I'm about to tell you one, and that was on pension reform.
Okay.
What the Republicans did was nothing short, and I'll just say this, brilliant, and I'm not alone in saying this. The Republican Party, took Governor Brown's pension reform package and submitted it without changing a period, a comma, a dash, a dot. His 12-point plan. He's a Democrat, you're Republicans.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a perfect example of cooperating and triangulating legislative Democrats.
It is. Sometimes, though, he likes to play it a little bit, I think, where he'll start giving some things away. So when we were put forth our budget, which was in accordance with his, it sort of, you know, pinned him to the corner on that, where he has to stand firm.
But let's talk about pensions, though, because, you know, I would find it hard for the governor not to support his own pension reform plan as submitted by the Republicans. Is he?
You know, I believe he is, but you know, there's other things too that he has said publicly. Well, not publicly, but within our caucus, and that, you know, don't.
He faces challenges.
He faces challenges. Don't, you know, you're asking me to disarm my army, meaning, you know, he has been sort of, you know, got there because of the union, so that's a real challenge for him.
But what's interesting is, you know, you have the governor supporting pension reform. You even have legislative Democrats supporting pension reform. So do you think this year we can see real pension reform?
I don't think you're going to see it, to be honest with you.
I want to talk about another issue that is important to you, and that is your desire to honor the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Explain to me why it's important to you to honor their 102nd anniversary and what happened recently in Sacramento through your efforts.
Well, essentially, I love the Boy Scouts, right? Their code of ethics and conduct is about being, having courage, not just bravery courage, but moral courage, having integrity, trustworthiness, respect, reverence for God, love and duty to country and to your family and to your neighbors. I mean, of a day that we need young men and women to be virtuous who are coming up. I mean, the Boy Scouts do an excellent job at that. And so what happened, I submitted a resolution to honor them for their 102nd anniversary. And when I was in committee, the Democrats wanted to only honor them if they would sort of reprimand them with language for their stance against not allowing, you know,
gays and lesbians
as leadership. And so what I said is, no, I won't accept the amendment because I did not want them to politicize this and inject. What they were trying to do was inject their political will into a 102-year-old organization, and all I wanted to do was essentially honor a great organization, say thanks for all your hard work.
But could one argue that merely honoring the Boy Scouts, which for better or for worse, they have become a lightning rod? I mean, look, I know they've done a lot of great work.
And they continue to do a lot of great work.
And that is true, but again, for better or for worse, they have become a lightning rod. And so, you know, the mere mention of them in a legislative body is going to raise the ire of opponents and supporters of gay and lesbian rights. I mean, it's automatic.
I agree. But remember, this goes beyond just the gay and lesbian issue. This is a body, and not a very good body right now, in light of the deficit we're in, who is injecting their political will into a 102-year-old private nonprofit organization. In other words, when we get back to the principles of the American founding, the founders wanted government's power to be limited. Well, you know, today they stick their nose in about everything. Well, so what I was saying is, look, you're trying to make this a politicize this and inject what you believe, you know, your politics should be. Leave them alone. Let's just honor them for the good work that they've done.
There's no doubt they're private. And I believe the Supreme Court has ruled that that the Boy Scouts can exclude or include whomever they choose because they're a private organization.
Yeah, they're a lot like the, in other words, it'd be, you know, if we allow the Democrats in Sacramento to do that, what's next? The Catholic Church for their stance against contraception. In other words, you cannot, you should not, you know, there's free speech. This is supposed to be America.
Right.
And so what I did is I just could not allow that to happen because I felt like...
But were you surprised? I mean, I have to think...
No, actually they were surprised because there was so much attention nationally. You know, there were articles from the desert to the sea to Miami Herald to the Anchorage paper.
I would presume, did you expect this to happen, or did you think this was going to be one of those, you know, resolutions? Here it goes, thank you.
Get in. No, honestly, yes.
Really?
I remember I'm up my rookie season up there, right? The first term. And so I went in there, I can honestly say with just purely innocent, assuming this was going to take place. And the next thing I know is this is on the national news and in almost every paper in America. But the thing is I tell you what, when you read the blogs, it was about a 10-to-1 favor of supporting the Boy Scouts. And it wasn't just a homosexual issue. It was the public who wrote the blogs. They want government out of their business.
And your sense is that if the resolution included language condemning the Boy Scouts, that would be government in their business, or you just didn't want government getting involved?
I didn't want government to get involved telling the Boy Scouts after 102 years how they should run their organization, which they've done very successfully.
Is the mere resolution getting government involved?
No, the resolution is honoring the Boy Scouts, but I don't think you should hand them, and you know, the big print hands them something, then the little print slaps them down. And so that's why I was opposed to that.
So what now on this very issue? Because as you said, little did you know it would become such a national issue. I had heard about it before. You had reminded me of this issue being brought up in Sacramento.
Yeah, well, the gentleman who proposed the amendment was Mike Fuhrer. Nice guy.
Of Los Angeles.
I like Mike. I like him a lot.
Bright guy.
In fact, very bright. Perhaps one of the smartest guys in the state legislature. And so his amendment was that.
I guess the reason I ask this is I have not known you to necessarily be someone who is focused like a laser beam on socially conservative issues. You've been more of a business guy. And so is this changing your focus, or are you still going to focus on
No, I'm here to serve the people in a manner that's aligned with the political principles of limited government. And so whether government oversteps their bounds in business, which they do a lot, like trying to unionize babysitters, that we had another bill 2 weeks ago come up with that, or whether it's injecting themselves into a political debate, into the Boy Scouts, or into any churches, for an example, that is not a good thing.
Mike Morrell, I appreciate you joining us. His name is Mike Morrell, member of the California State Assembly. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Mike Ramos about the death penalty. He is the district attorney for San Bernardino County. He opposes an initiative that will be on the ballot to abolish California's death penalty. We'll be right back. Welcome back. It's California Edition. We are joined by Mike Ramos. He is the district attorney in San Bernardino County. And sir, as you know, there will be a ballot initiative this coming November that would abolish the death penalty in the state of California. That is quite a huge event for this state. It would become the 18th state in our union to abolish the death penalty. Where does this DA come down on this initiative?
This DA absolutely is opposed to that initiative. It's my priority going into this election season. I think what they're talking about and the facts and the way they're pushing it to the public is false. It's wrong.
Let's talk about it, because it is an incredibly complex issue, and I think there are so many of us who are conflicted.
Sure.
I know I am.
Sure.
I am very conflicted, and I want to get a sense from you about how the death penalty is meted out in this state.
Right.
We know that there are over 700 people sitting on death row today.
Right.
And we also know that since the death penalty became legal again in our state, what is it, 13 people have been executed?
Right.
A very small number.
Well, let me take those in two different parts.
Please.
First, if you look at the number, 725 people on death row, compared to the thousands of murders that happen in the state of California, you can see that DAs across the state use their discretion, our discretion on whether to seek somebody's life when they're eligible for the death penalty is a very, very small percentage. They're the most horrendous murders there are. I mean, cop killers,
Sure.
baby killers, serial killers.
But here's the challenge. An inmate on death row is more likely to die from natural causes than from the death penalty. And we are keeping these people alive in a jail system that is unique.
Right.
If these people had been in the general population, it would be less expensive to keep them, and they would die as they would die, but it's just so much more expensive to operate a death row.
Well, see, and that's one of the statements they're talking about, a fiscal issue, and nobody's really been able to prove the expense. It's expensive to keep any prisoner in state prison. The only organization, I think it was the Rand Corporation, that did an objective study, says they can't tell one way or another whether it's more expensive to keep a death row inmate in versus a LWOP, a life prisoner.
Yeah, I'm sure you know that in June 2011, Judge Alarcon of the Ninth Circuit and a professor from Loyola did a study about this
Right.
very issue. On that study,
Right.
they said that the state budget must be $184 million more each year due to the death penalty. Now, that may be an expense that we choose to make.
Right.
But that is $184 million that arguably could go to schools, prison construction.
Right. And again, I disagree with their numbers. I don't know where they're getting their numbers. It costs $57,000, $53,000, depending on the state, dollars a year to house a state prisoner. You're going to pay our salaries, prosecutors, public defenders, judges, to prosecute these cases, whether they're a capital case or not.
But
so again, where are the numbers coming from?
But here we are today. We have not had a death penalty meted out in about 6 years. And why? We don't have an approved system for execution. We had our lethal injection rules tossed out in December of 2011.
Sure.
Even the Republican-appointed Supreme Court Justice in California has said the death penalty is no longer effective. I mean, it is an interesting chorus
Sure.
of people that are talking about the death penalty as it relates to California.
I think it needs to be fixed. It's not working, but it should not be abolished. Two things need to be fixed. One is the appellate process. There needs to be some legislations to clean this appellate process up. Right now, it's just being used to delay.
And I want to interject and then
Sure.
get to the second point. On the appellate process, we know that death penalty appeals are 20 times more expensive than life without the possibility of parole, because
Sure.
it's the death sentence, it's automatic.
Right.
But the question is this a state process of review, or a federal process of review? Because we can change our state rules to try to fix the appellate process. We can't change federal. We
can't, and it would take some federal legislation. But here's an example. We have Kevin Cooper, who killed a family out of Chino prison. He's been on death row for 27 years. He's been to the California State Supreme Court 10 times, the United States Supreme Court 10 times. Every time he goes, our case gets stronger. The man is guilty. Well, we've proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. This system is being used. So we need to fix the state, and we need to fix it at the federal level.
You know what, sir? I believe you. I really believe that we do need bona fide reform of death penalty appeals. But the problem for so many is we've been hearing that song for years, and we haven't seen the reform. And so what we're seeing on the street is just bona fide, we're done. And you look at the drafters of the initiative. I mean, it's Ron Briggs, who ran the campaign to bring the death penalty back in 1978. It's Donald Heller, his colleague, who ran the campaign to bring the death penalty back, a former warden at San Quentin, a former DA of LA County. I mean, these are not liberals singing Kumbaya. It's the frustration level is so severe that it's just, we're done. We're done.
And with all due respect to them, and I have a lot of respect for those individuals you've talked about, and former, I think, DA Gil Garcetti,
of Los Angeles.
I disagree with them. We see every day, we see the families that have suffered these horrendous losses to a murder, who are suffering, who continue to want justice to be done for their loved ones.
Let me ask you this, and this is, I think, an interesting question. What's worse for the perpetrator in terms of punishment? Rotting in prison for your entire life, knowing you're never going to get out, or dying?
Well, if you were going to rot in a prison like that movie Papillon, where you're sitting there and you're in a single cell and they're feeding you rotten food or whatever, that would probably be worse. But in our state, in our prison system, with the ACLU and all prisons' rights, they have it pretty good. They get nice meals, they get to go outside, they get television, they get more magazines than you and I get.
So is that where we need reform?
No, I don't think. Do I believe that there should be some changes in the prison, the way we treat prisoners? Yes, not inhumane, but I mean, we need to treat them like humans. But I truly believe that a death sentence is still a deterrent to an individual that commits a murder.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Let me tell you why.
Really? I mean, there are plenty of reasons to support the death penalty. But I mean, like you said, you really think that a person who's about to shoot someone says, I'm going to get death if I do this, versus, You know, I mean, studies have indicated that murders are higher in states with death penalties, especially in the South.
It's called premeditation and deliberation. What deliberation means, the criminal is deliberating. If I do this action, what's going to happen to me? Oh yeah, and you have to have premeditation, deliberation, or felony murder to get a death penalty case.
So let's talk about where we go from here. It's fairly early in the campaign. We know that DAs are lining up against the initiative, but we know that this is not an initiative being pushed by a bunch of bleeding heart liberals. It's getting support from liberals, moderates, and conservatives. What's the public pulse? I mean, really talk to me, sir. What are you hearing? I know you're a big opponent. But, you know, 5 years ago, I think this would go down in defeat without a question. Now, I don't know. I mean, there's some ambivalence out there.
Well, you know the feeling I'm getting, and I will be honest with you. When I go, and just yesterday I was talking to a group, a service club, and when I bring up these facts and I talk about them, I'm still getting the feeling that a strong majority of the citizens of this state still believe in the death penalty.
The state or inland California?
Well, I think
you never know.
Well, here's the thing. California District Attorneys Association, as an organization, is opposed. So that means across the state. Now, there are certain parts of the state, I'm sure, that are going to be different. San Francisco, for example.
Who knows? There are plenty of Democrats that are in favor of the death penalty. I mean,
that's true. It's a nonpartisan issue.
It's a complicated issue.
But it's a good conversation to have, because when you ask any DA, it's the biggest decision we make is to take a person's life. We don't do it, you know.
Mike Ramos, I want to thank you for joining us and for your candor in this very important discussion. He is the District Attorney in San Bernardino County. I'm Brad Pomerantz. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.